This is Noah William, a titan of industry, about to accept the Philanthropist of the Year award. This is his wife, Audrey. In exactly 3 minutes, Noah will stand on that stage and deliver a speech that publicly humiliates her, calling her simple, childish, and his beautiful empty-headed charity case. He makes the entire room laugh at her. He doesn't know that Audrey's childish hobby, run from a secret lab under their home, has made her the 9th wealthiest woman in the world. And he definitely doesn't know that her company, Aura Therapeutics, is the mysterious entity that just bought all his debt. The laughter will stop. But for Noah William, the collapse is just beginning. The penthouse apartment on Park Avenue was less a home and more a statement of altitude. Noah William liked being high up. He liked looking down, whether it was from his corner office at William Innovations or from the 80th floor triple-paned windows of his residence. Everything below was a map he owned. Noah was a man sculpted from self-made mythology. He was all shark white teeth, deep baritone, and bespoke suits that cost more than a teacher's annual salary. He had built William Innovations from a modest consulting firm into a ravenous private equity monster, swallowing distressed assets and restructuring them, a polite term for firing thousands for profit. He was, by all accounts, a master of the universe. And then there was Audrey. To the glittering, sharp-edged world of New York high society, Audrey Hayes was Noah's greatest and simplest acquisition. She was quiet where he was loud, soft where he was brutal. She was an academic, a biologist by training, but she hadn't worked a day since their wedding. While Noah conquered Audrey, gardened. She volunteered at the botanical gardens. She read. She sketched in a series of leather-bound notebooks. Noah found this profoundly endearing and simultaneously pathetic. "What are you doodling now, darling?" he'd ask, loosening his tie as he walked in, his voice booming with the false cheer of a man who didn't really want an answer. "Protein chains," she'd murmur, not looking up from her book. "Right. Well, don't strain yourself. Our big night is tomorrow. The gala. You need to look rested." He tossed his keys into a crystal bowl, the sound like a small gunshot in the marble foyer. "And wear the blue. The simple one. The one I like." Audrey'd just nod. Of course, Noah. This was the rhythm of their life. His pronouncements, her acquiescence. But Noah was blind. He mistook her silence for simplicity. He mistook her stillness for weakness. He had no idea that beneath the cultivated soil of her hobbies, Audrey was tending to something far more complex than roses. Lately, Noah had been under a strain that even his monumental ego couldn't fully conceal. William Innovations was over-leveraged. He'd made a series of bad bets on commercial real estate, convinced the return-to-office wave would be a tsunami. It had been a ripple. He was bleeding capital, and the vultures at the Wall Street Journal were starting to circle, sniffing out the weakness. "Carter, you fix this." He'd been shouting into his phone earlier that day, his knuckles white on the glass railing of his balcony. Benjamin Carter, his COO, was a mirror image of Noah, just paler and more nervous. "We're trying, Rick." Carter's voice tinny. "The margins are just too thin. We need a massive influx of cash, or the Q4 report is going to be a bloodbath. We need this new acquisition to go through, this Aura Therapeutics. If we can absorb their patent portfolio before the audit, we can use their assets to cover our losses." "Then get it done," Noah snarled. "Find out who this mysterious CEO is. Nobody stays anonymous in this town. Find him, flatter him, buy him. I don't care. I need that company." He hung up and turned back inside. Audrey was arranging flowers in a vase, the picture of domestic tranquility. Big day tomorrow, Audrey, he said, smiling, the stress melting away. He was Noah William. He always won. Yes, Noah. Philanthropist of the Year. It's wonderful. It is, he said, patting her on the head as one would a favored golden retriever. It's good for the brand, and it's important people see us together, see our perfect life. He glanced at her notebook open on the counter. Just leave what is it? Protein doodles, leave them at home. Tomorrow you just have to smile and look pretty. Can you manage that? Audrey looked up, her blue eyes as clear and deep as an Arctic lake. She gave him a small, slow smile. I can manage that, Noah. The grand ballroom at the plaza was a sea of black ties and shimmering gowns. Chandeliers dripped crystals like frozen rain, and the air hummed with the sound of 100 conversations, all centered on money, power, and who was failing. Noah William was in his element. He moved through the crowd like a shark, all grace and latent threat. Audrey was a silk-clad shadow at his side, wearing the simple blue dress he'd demanded. It was elegant, but in a room of couture peacocks, it was designed to make her fade. Rick, my boy. A voice like gravel cut through the din. Connor McDermott. Noah's oldest friend and most bitter rival clapped him on the back. Connor ran a competing fund and had a reputation for being just as ruthless as Noah, but with a thin veneer of sleazy charm. Connor, good to see you upright, Noah replied with a tight smile. Connor's eyes slid to Audrey. He took her hand and kissed it, lingering just a second too long. Dr. Hayes, you are as always the most breathtaking woman in the room. This color, it's divine. Rick, you truly outkicked your coverage. She's my best investment, Connor, Noah said, pulling Audrey closer by the waist, his grip just a little too tight. A low-risk asset, with a high beauty yield. How financial of you, Audrey said, her voice quiet, withdrawing her hand from Connor's. It's just business, darling. Noah chuckled, steering her away. McDermott is a snake. Don't trust him. The dinner was endless. Course after course of meticulously plated food they barely touched. Finally, the main event. A senator introduced Noah, listing his supposed charitable donations. Donations Audrey knew were shrewdly calculated write-offs. Noah took the stage to thunderous applause. He stood at the podium, basking in the light. He looked golden, invincible. He began his speech, thanking the board, the city, his team. Standard fare. But, he said, his voice dropping into a register of false intimacy, the real person I have to thank is my wife, my beautiful Audrey. He motioned for her to stand. Reluctantly, she rose. The spotlight swung, catching her, pinning her like an insect. You know, folks, Noah continued, a folksy, patronizing grin spreading across his face. They say behind every great man is a great woman. Well, my Audrey, she's not great. She's simple, and I mean that in the best way. A few nervous titters rippled through the crowd. Audrey's smile was frozen, her face pale. While I'm out here in the jungle, wrestling with SEC regulations and hostile markets, she's at home. She's tending to her roses. She's drawing little pictures in her notebooks. He chuckled, and this time the crowd, sensing permission, joined in. She reminds me what it's like to have a simple, uncluttered mind. A childish mind, really. She's my own little charity case, aren't you, darling? He raised his glass to her. She keeps me grounded by reminding me that not everyone is built for the fight. Some are just built to be pretty. To my simple, beautiful wife, Audrey, thank you for making my complex life look so good." The room exploded in applause. It was cruel. It was public. It was a complete and utter assassination of her character, disguised as a toast. Flashes popped, capturing her rictus smile. Noah, basking, blew her a kiss from the stage. Audrey sat down. Her hands were perfectly still in her lap. Connor McDermott from across the room looked at her with something like pity, which was almost worse. Benjamin Carter at her own table was laughing so hard he was wiping his eyes. She sat through the rest of the applause. She watched Noah accept the heavy crystal award. She watched him preen. And then, as the dessert course was being served, she discreetly pushed back her chair. "Excuse me," she murmured to the table. "Just powdering my nose." She walked, not ran, to the exit. Her back was straight. Her pace was even. She didn't look at anyone. The moment she was in the marbled quiet of the ladies' lounge, she pulled her phone from her clutch. She didn't check her reflection. She didn't wipe away a tear, because there wasn't one. There was only ice. She dialed a single number. "Mr. Harrison," she said, her voice no longer soft, but a blade of cold steel. "Dr. Hayes," a crisp, professional voice replied. "How was the speech?" "Predictable," Audrey said, staring at her reflection in the mirror. The woman in the simple blue dress looked back, but her eyes were lethal. "He just publicly defined me as a simple, childish, empty-headed charity case. I believe that satisfies the public disparagement clause in our post-nuptial agreement, doesn't it?" "It does, Doctor, with prejudice." "Good. Initiate Phase 2. Activate the Aura protocols. I want a full press release on the Journal's Wire by 9 a.m. Announce our Q3 earnings and the completion of the new patent acquisition. Then I want you to execute the buy-up of William Innovation's remaining unsecured debt from the holding company in Zurich. All of it." "And the acquisition?" Harrison asked. "He thinks he's hunting us," Audrey said. "He's about to find out he's the prey. Send the offer, not to his board, directly to his creditors. We're not buying his company, David. We're buying his debt. We're foreclosing. It will be a massacre, Dr. Hayes." "He called it business, David," Audrey said, smoothing her simple blue dress. "Let's show him what good business looks like. I'll be home in an hour. We have work to do." She hung up, took a deep breath, composed her face back into a mask of placid neutrality, and walked back out to the gala to congratulate her husband. To understand how Audrey Hayes could topple a giant, you had to understand what Noah William refused to see. 16 years ago, Audrey Hayes didn't exist. There was only Dr. Audrey Francis, a postdoctoral fellow at Johns Hopkins, with a mind that moved like lightning. She wasn't just in the field of cellular biology. She was on the verge of redefining it. Her focus targeted drug delivery. How to get chemotherapy to kill a cancer cell without touching the healthy cell next to it. It was the holy grail of oncology, and she was sketching the map. Then she met Noah William. He was charming, powerful, and utterly intoxicating. He loved her brilliance, but only as an ornament. When they got engaged, he'd laughed at her $42,000 a year fellowship. "You won't need that, darling," he'd said, slipping a diamond onto her finger that was worth 10 times that. "You're with me now. You can—" "What is it you do?" "Put things in petri dishes." "You can do that as a hobby." Audrey, blinded by what she thought was love, agreed. She'd put her hobby aside. But a mind like hers doesn't just turn off. It just goes quiet. For the first 2 years of their marriage, she tried to be the wife he wanted. She hosted dinners. She chaired charities. She redecorated the penthouse. And she felt herself dying. The doodles Noah mocked were her lifeline. They were complex molecular structures, algorithms for protein folding equations that existed on the bleeding edge of biochemistry. The turning point came 6 years into their marriage. Noah, in a fit of pique over a bad deal, had stormed into her study. "This is what you do all day. Draw nonsense. It's embarrassing, Audrey." "My wife, the professional daydreamer." "Clean this crap out. We're turning this into a cigar lounge." That night, she didn't argue. She simply moved. Under the guise of a wine cellar expansion and a geothermal refit for the garden, Audrey had commissioned a separate construction. Deep beneath the manicured roses and the flagstone paths of their Connecticut estate, the one Noah only visited for weekend parties, she built her sanctuary. It was a 2,000-square-foot, soundproofed, lead-lined, biosecure laboratory. It had its own ventilation, its own fiber-optic line, and its own power grid, buried and silent. While Noah was upstairs hosting garden parties, Audrey was downstairs in a lab coat, running simulations on a private server cluster. She solved it. The patent was for a synthesized liposome, a smart fat molecule that could be programmed to find a specific cell marker, like a cancer cell, and deliver its payload only to that cell. It was a revolution. It meant an end to the brutal side effects of chemotherapy. It meant life. She filed the patents under her maiden name, Dr. Audrey Francis. She knew she couldn't build it alone. She needed a bulldog, a businessman, who was everything. Noah was smart, ruthless, and driven, but with one key difference: integrity. She found him in David Harrison. Harrison had been the general counsel for a pharmaceutical giant that Noah had tried and failed to acquire. Noah had humiliated Harrison in the press, calling him a glorified paper pusher. Audrey, doing her research, recognized Harrison's brilliance. He hadn't been outmaneuvered. He'd been sandbagged by his own timid board. Audrey approached him in secret. She didn't show him a business plan. She showed him the data. Harrison, a man of cold logic, stared at her simulations for a full 10 minutes. He looked up, his eyes wide. "Doctor, do you have any idea what this is?" "I do," Audrey said. "The question is, will you know what to do with it?" "This isn't a product," Harrison said, his voice trembling slightly. "This is a Nobel Prize. This is everything." Together, they formed Aura Therapeutics. Audrey provided the science. Harrison built the corporate fortress around it. They sourced seed funding from European venture capital firms who had no ties to Wall Street. They built labs in Switzerland and Ireland. For 8 years, Aura operated in total stealth. Audrey was the anonymous founder, Dr. Francis, and Harrison was the public-facing CEO. As Aura grew, so did its needs. Audrey recruited her old mentor, from Hopkins professor Alistair Finch, to head her R&D. Professor Finch's son, Matthew Finch, had just made partner at the prestigious New York law firm Morgan & Finch, the same firm Noah William used for his corporate dealings. Matthew, disgusted by Noah's arrogance and loyal to his father, became Audrey's silent legal weapon inside her husband's own camp. While Noah gave Audrey an allowance of $50,000 a month, which she dutifully spent on clothes and charity events he approved of Aura, Therapeutics was clearing $400 million a quarter. Audrey's personal stake, held in a complex series of trusts managed by Harrison, was estimated at north of $20 billion. Noah William thought he was a titan. He was a minnow swimming in his wife's ocean. The simple blue dress Noah had forced her to wear to the gala. It was a custom job. Woven into the silk fibers were biometric sensors recording the ambient sound heart rate variability and vocal stress patterns. The speech wasn't just an insult, it was evidence. When Audrey walked back into the ballroom, her smile was serene. Noah flushed with victory, and champagne pulled her to him. "See? That wasn't so bad, was it?" He whispered, his breath hot. "You looked beautiful up there. My simple, beautiful girl." "You were perfect, Noah," Audrey whispered back, patting his chest. "Absolutely perfect." He didn't feel the small pin she pressed into his lapel, a tiny, powerful microphone that would transmit his every word for the rest of the night directly to a secure server managed by David Harrison. The humiliation was complete. The trap was set. The game was on. Noah William woke the next morning with a blinding champagne headache and an ego the size of Manhattan. He felt magnificent. He'd put everyone in their place, his rivals, his sycophants, and most importantly, his wife. He padded into his home office expecting to spend the day fielding congratulatory calls. Instead, his private line was blinking with a frantic urgency. It was Benjamin Carter. "Rick, thank God. Are you seeing this?" Carter sounded like he was hyperventilating. "Seeing what the rave reviews of my speech." Noah poured himself a coffee. "Know the Wall Street Journal, turn it on." Now, Noah flipped on the 80-inch screen. The breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom. Mystery Biotech Aura Therapeutics releases stunning Q3 earnings, announces game-changer oncology patent. Stock surges 400% in pre-market trading. Noah froze the coffee cup halfway to his lips. Aura. That's our acquisition target. Carter. This is good news. Their valuation just skyrocketed. When we acquire them, our books will look incredible. It solves everything. That's the problem, Rick, Carter shrieked. They're not our target anymore. They're not a unicorn. They're a dragon. Their cash on hand is... Rick, it's more than our entire market cap. They can't be bought. Noah's blood ran cold. What do you mean? Everyone has a price. Get Harrison on the phone. I've been trying for 3 hours. He won't take my call. But that's not the worst part. Our debt. You know the unsecured notes we sold to that Swiss holding company to cover the real estate losses. What about them? Noah snapped. They sold them. All of them. In a single block transaction processed at 5:01 a.m. this morning. Sold them to who? Aura Therapeutics. The coffee cup slipped from Noah's hand, shattering on the marble floor. What? They're our new creditors, Rick. They own us. Every bad loan, every leveraged bet. They hold the paper. This is a hostile move, Noah roared, panic finally breaking through his arrogance. This is predatory. Who the hell is this David Harrison? Who is behind him? Find out, I want a name. He slammed his hand on his desk, his Philanthropist of the Year award rattling. Get our lawyers. Get Morgan and Fitch. Get them now. He spent the next 48 hours in a state of escalating panic. He was a king, besieged in his own castle. His calls to his bankers went to voicemail. His texts to his board members were met with curt, formal replies. We are monitoring the situation, one replied. Monitoring, you're supposed to be fighting. Noah threw his phone across the room. Audrey was a ghost. She was at the Botanical Gardens or at a spa retreat. She left him polite, useless notes. Noah, dinner is in the fridge. Please don't wait up. He barely noticed her absence. He was too busy watching his empire crumble. The first official notice arrived by bonded courier. It was an emergency summons for a meeting of the board of directors of William Innovations. The meeting had not been called by Noah. It had been called by the new majority stakeholder of the company's controlling debt. "They can't do that," Noah yelled at his lawyer Matthew Finch over the phone. "Actually, Rick, they can." Matthew's voice was cool, precise. "It's in the covenant of the loan agreement you signed. Section 4, subsection B. In the event of a credit rating downgrade, which we got last week, remember, the debt holder reserves the right to call an immediate board vote to assess executive leadership." You wrote that covenant, Finch." "Yes, I did," Matthew said. "I'm a very good lawyer. I protect my clients' interests. The meeting is tomorrow, 10 a.m., your office." Noah was trapped. He tried to move his personal funds, but his private banker finally called him back with chilling news. "Mr. William, I'm afraid your personal accounts and credit lines, they were all leveraged against your William Innovations stock. With your stock in free fall and your debt called in, I'm afraid your assets are frozen, pending review." He was broke, or at least he couldn't access $1. He sat in his vast, silent penthouse, the New York skyline glittering indifferently. He was cornered. For the first time in his life, Noah William was afraid. He thought back to the gala, the applause, the adulation. He thought of his speech, his perfect, cutting words. He thought of Audrey. Simple, he'd called her. A slow, creeping dread, colder than any market panic, began to settle in his stomach. He remembered her small, serene smile as he'd kissed her goodnight. He'd thought it was submission. He was a fool. He stormed through the penthouse. "Audrey, Audrey." She wasn't there. Her closet was not empty, but curated. Her personal effects, her sketches, her notebooks, all gone. The only thing left on her vanity was a single perfect withered rose. He was alone, and tomorrow he was walking into his own execution. The boardroom of William Innovations was Noah's cathedral. The walls were dark mahogany. The carpet was ocean-deep blue, and a 40-foot table, polished to a mirror finish, ran the length of the room. At its head sat Noah's custom-made chair, more throne than seat. But today he wasn't sitting in it. He was pacing by the window, his $5,000 suit rumpled, his tie askew. The board members' men he'd known and bullied for decades filed in silently. They wouldn't meet his eye. They just took their seats, their faces grim. His COO, Benjamin Carter, sat at the far end, visibly trembling, shuffling papers. "What is this, Ben?" Noah snapped. "A funeral. They're here." "Rick," Carter whispered, just as the main doors opened. In walked David Harrison. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with the impassive face of a federal judge. Beside him was Matthew Finch, Noah's own lawyer, now holding a briefcase that clearly wasn't for Noah's benefit. "Harrison," Noah spat, "you've got a hell of a nerve. You think you can just walk in here and—" "Please take a seat, Mr. William," Harrison said, his voice quiet but commanding absolute authority. The board members flinched. Noah instinctively moved toward his throne. "Not that one," Harrison said. "That chair belongs to the acting chairperson. Your seat is over there." He pointed to a small supplementary chair against the wall, one usually reserved for interns. "How dare you? Noah, sit down." Matthew Finch advised, his tone no longer friendly. "You are here as a guest. You have no voting rights. My shares. Your shares are pledged as collateral against the debt we now own," Harrison said flatly. "You own nothing. You are a spectator." Rage and confusion warred on Noah's face. Who is behind this? Who is Dr. Francis? Who is the CEO of Aura? I want a name. I will not be ambushed by some cowardly anonymous. I am not anonymous, Noah. The voice came from the doorway. Noah turned. The blood drained from his face. He swayed, gripping the back of a chair. Audrey Hayes walked into the room. She was not the woman from the gala. The simple blue dress was gone. In its place was a sharp, steel-grey bespoke suit. Her hair, usually soft and loose, was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon. Her doodle notebook was gone, replaced by a sleek tablet. She wore no jewelry except her old, simple wedding band, which she twisted thoughtfully. She looked powerful. She looked like him. Audrey. Noah's voice was a choked whisper. What? What is this? Are you lost, darling? This is a closed meeting. Audrey walked past him, not even glancing his way. She took the seat at the head of the table. Noah's throne. It fit her perfectly. She placed her tablet on the table. The screen lit up, projecting the Aura Therapeutics logo onto the wall behind her. Good morning, gentlemen, she said to the board. Her voice was the one he'd heard on the phone in the pantry, the one he'd dismissed as her talking to the garden club. It was crisp, clear, and absolutely commanding. Noah, stop gaping. You look like a trout. Audrey, this is insane, he stammered. Is this a joke? Did you do this? Do what, Noah? She asked, finally turning her icy gaze on him. Build a multi-billion-dollar biomedical company from scratch, file 74, revolutionary patents, or buy the mountain of toxic debt you use to prop up this house of cards. Yes, I did all of that. She turned back to the board. Gentlemen, allow me to introduce myself. I am Dr. Audrey Francis Hayes. I am the founder, chief scientist, and CEO of Aura Therapeutics. As of 9:01 a.m., Aura has acquired a 68% controlling interest in William Innovations, having converted your company's catastrophic debt into majority equity. In short, I own this company. I own this room. And Noah. She looked at him, a small, cold smile playing on her lips. I own you. Noah stared at her. His mind was breaking. The doodles, the protein, chains, doodles. Audrey laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. Those doodles, Noah, were the base code for the Aura 7 liposome, the patent that is currently saving the lives of 20,000 stage 4 cancer patients, the patent that just made my company, more valuable than yours ever was, even at its peak. But the money, he sputtered. You used my money. This is theft. Your money. Audrey almost looked amused. Noah, the allowance you gave me, the one you so generously doled out, I donated it, all of it, to a shelter for battered women. Aura was funded by a pre-seed grant I won at Johns Hopkins, a grant you told me to throw away with my college clutter and 2 European venture firms. I haven't needed your money in over a decade. I just enjoyed watching you think I did. She stood up. The simple woman, the childish mind. It was the perfect cover. You were so blinded by your own ego, you never once thought to ask me what I was really thinking about. You just wanted me to be pretty. She looked at the board. The vote today is a formality. Noah William is removed as CEO and chairman effective immediately. Benjamin Carter is also terminated for, let's call it, gross mismanagement. Carter made a small squeaking sound. "This company," Audrey continued, "is being dissolved. The William Innovations name will cease to exist by close of day. Aura will be absorbing the few viable assets, and more importantly, the talent you've so thoroughly squandered. Everyone else will be let go." Noah finally found his voice, a high-pitched, desperate shriek. "You can't. This is my life, my name. You, bitch!" He lunged, not at her, but at the table, sweeping his arm across it, sending glasses and notepads crashing to the floor. "It's all lies. She's a fraud. She's—" "Noah," Audrey said, her voice sharp. "Sit down." He froze, his arm raised. The power dynamic in the room had shifted so completely, so seismically, that his body obeyed her before his mind could. He stared at his wife, the woman he had mocked, the woman he had shamed, and he saw her for the first time a stranger, a brilliant, terrifying stranger who had just stolen his life from under his nose. Noah Williams' world wasn't just collapsing. It was evaporating as if it had never existed at all. He stared at Audrey, his mind a screeching, buffering loop of cognitive dissonance. This was not Audrey. This was a chimera. This was a nightmare. He turned, grasping for the one pillar of reality he thought he had left. "Finch!" he barked, his voice cracking with a desperate, misplaced authority. "Matthew, what is this? This performance? This is a circus. Shut this down. You work for me. I'll have you disbarred, you." Matthew Finch, Noah's own lawyer, the man who had filed his lawsuits and shielded his assets, merely looked up from his briefcase. He closed it with a soft, final click. "Actually, Noah, I don't work for you," Matthew said. His voice was not cold like Audrey's, but laced with a quiet, simmering contempt that was somehow worse. "I haven't really worked for you for 8 years. You were just a client, a very loud, very demanding client." What are you talking about? You never once asked about my family, Noah. You just called at 3 a.m. and demanded I make it go away. You probably don't even remember my father's name. Noah's mind, frantic, searched. Your father, the professor. The old man at the Christmas party. Professor Alistair Finch, Matthew said, his eyes hardening. The old fossil you once told Audrey to stop wasting her time with. My father is the chief of research and development for Aura Therapeutics. He's been Dr. Hayes's mentor since she was at Johns Hopkins. My loyalty, Noah, was never to your parasitic brand of capitalism. It was to my father. It was to the work. You used our firm to build a monument to your own ego. Dr. Hayes used me to build a legal fortress for a miracle. The betrayal was so total, so deep, Noah couldn't even process it. He was surrounded. He was in a cage he hadn't even seen being built. He fell back on his only instinct attack. "This is fraud," he roared, pointing a trembling finger at Audrey. "She's the fraud. She used my money. My resources. She stole this company. Noah, stop," Audrey said, her voice quiet, but slicing through his tirade. "You're embarrassing yourself. Let's talk about real fraud, shall we?" She signaled to David Harrison. "Mr. Harrison, the secondary file, please. Project Chimera." Harrison tapped his tablet. The main screen behind Audrey, which had shown the Aura logo, flickered. It was now a flowchart, a complex, damning flowchart of shell corporations, offshore accounts and wire transfers, all originating from a single box, at the top, William Innovations. You, Audrey said, standing and walking to the screen. Didn't think we'd run an audit before acquiring. I've had a forensic team living in your books for 6 months. They are, by the way, disgustingly messy. She pointed to a name on the chart, the William Next Gen Foundation. This one was my favorite. The slush fund you used to donate to your charities, which then paid you back in consulting fees, all while claiming it as a tax-exempt philanthropic endeavor. The very philanthropy you won that award for. Her finger traced a line. You donated $10 million, got the tax write-off, and then the foundation paid $9.8 million to a shell in the Cayman's Global Market Solutions, which my auditors found you are the sole signatory for. You used a children's literacy fund, Noah, as your personal piggy bank. Noah's face, which had been pale, now flushed a mottled, sickly grey. This was beyond a takeover. This was a criminal indictment. But that's just vanity, Noah. Audrey continued, her voice devoid of emotion. This is your masterpiece. A new chart appeared. The Q2 reports. The ones you and Mr. Carter signed off on. The ones that claimed your commercial real estate portfolio was stable. My team found you'd been inflating the assets by, what was it, David? An average of 38%. She pointed to an image of a sleek glass building. The Patriot Plaza in Chicago. You listed its value at $900 million. It's 60% vacant, and my auditors couldn't get it valued at more than $350 million, and that's being generous. You've been lying to your investors, to your board, to your creditors. And why? She said, as the final piece of the puzzle locked into place on the screen. To secure this, a $500 million bridge loan from First National. A loan you got based on fraudulent documents. A loan you didn't use for development, but to cover the catastrophic $800 million bath you took in the Singapore commodities market. A loss you never reported. She turned from the screen. That's not creative accounting, Noah. That's wire fraud. That's mail fraud. Those are multiple egregious SEC violations. That's... What, Matthew? What's the legal term? Matthew Finch, his former lawyer, looked at Noah without a hint of pity. That's a minimum of 25 years in a federal prison, Noah. At the far end of the table, Benjamin Carter, who had been shrinking in his chair, made a sound like a deflating tire. He let out a high-pitched, terrified squeal and slid sideways, his head hitting the carpet with a soft, pathetic whoomp. He was out cold. No one even flinched. But Noah was no longer listening to the words wire fraud or prison. He was staring at his wife. The numbers, the crimes, the jail time, none of it was as terrifying as her. His mind flashed back. The gala. Her simple blue dress. Her quiet, serene smile as he mocked her. Her powdering her nose to make that phone call. The microphone. You. He whispered the word, catching in his throat. His entire body went cold. The gala. My speech. His voice was a horrified rasp. You knew. You knew what I was going to say. You wanted me to. That night. You let me. You set me up. This was the moment. The realization that his company, his money, that was just the leverage. The true target was his ego. She hadn't just come for his wallet. She had come for his soul. Audrey, who had been pacing, stopped. She looked at him, and for the first time a flicker of something, not pity but perhaps curiosity, crossed her features. "Set you up, Noah?" she asked, tilting her head. "I simply gave you a stage, a microphone, and an audience. You wrote your own script. Your arrogance is so profound, so predictable, I've been able to model it on a spreadsheet for the last 5 years." She took a slow step toward him, and another. She stopped directly in front of his small, humiliating intern chair. She was the titan. He was the doodle. She looked down at him. "You had to diminish me to feel strong. You couldn't resist the urge to call me simple in a room full of your peers. You had to call me your beautiful, empty-headed charity case to make yourself feel like a master of the universe." She leaned in her voice, dropping to a whisper that cut him deeper than any shout ever could. "My hobby is now the single largest medical patent in a decade, with a market cap that makes your entire empire look like a rounding error. Your empire is a bankrupt shell built on lies and stolen money. So let me ask you one last time, Noah." Her eyes were blue ice. "Who is the charity case now?" The words didn't just register. They detonated. The air left Noah Williams' lungs in a pained, silent whoosh. The room, the faces of the board members, his jury, the screen with his crimes, his epitaph and the face of his wife, his executioner, all blurred, tilting on an axis. He tried to speak. A wet, gurgling sound was all that came out. He tried to stand. His legs, once the pillars of a colossus, were now just water. My heart," he gasped, clutching at his chest. It wasn't a lie. It wasn't a feint. The psychological shock was so profound, so absolute, his body was giving out. The master of the universe couldn't comprehend a reality that he didn't control. He lurched, not forward, but sideways, his arm flailing, grabbing at the credenza to stop his fall. His hand found the one thing he had brought to this meeting as a show of his power, the heavy crystal Philanthropist of the Year award. He pulled it with him. It crashed to the floor, at the same time he did, shattering into 1,000 glittering, worthless pieces. A perfect final metaphor. Noah William landed heavily, his head cracking against the solid mahogany leg of the table. He lay in the wreckage of his trophy, a broken king on a broken throne, completely and utterly undone. There was a full 5-second silence. Audrey watched him, her face impassive. She simply observed. She didn't rush to help. She didn't flinch. She just took a small, clinical breath. She stepped back, smoothing the lapel of her grey suit. "David," she said, her voice as calm as if ordering coffee. "Call security. I want Mr. Carter escorted from the premises. He is a flight risk. Then call a medical team for Mr. William. I want him on a 72-hour psychiatric hold the moment he's medically cleared. He's a liability." She turned to Matthew. "Matthew, serve his personal counsel, the ones not in this room with the divorce papers, the temporary restraining order, and the full SEC complaint. I want his personal assets frozen before he wakes up." Finally, she turned to the stunned, silent, terrified board. "Gentlemen," she said, as if brushing a piece of lint from her shoulder, "apologies for the interruption. Now, as I was saying, we have a lot of work to do. Let's talk about the future." The silence that followed Noah Williams' thud against the mahogany table was absolute. It was a vacuum, broken only by the faint, choked moans of Benjamin Carter from the floor and the distant, indifferent siren of a New York ambulance. The board members, titans of industry themselves, were frozen. They stared not at Noah's crumpled form, but at Audrey. They saw her, truly saw her for the first time. Not as a wife, not as a victim, but as a predator who had just completed a clean surgical kill. Her lack of reaction, the absence of panic, of pity, of anything, was more terrifying than any outburst. David Harrison was already on the phone, his voice a low, professional monotone. Security to the main conference room, and a medical team. Yes, 2 individuals down, 1 panic, 1 head trauma. Audrey stepped around the shattered crystal of the Philanthropist Award, as if it were simply glass on a sidewalk. She didn't look at her husband. She looked at the oldest board member, a man named Robert Stansfield, who had been on Noah's father's board. "Robert," she said, her voice pulling him from his terrified reverie. "You will act as temporary chairperson to ratify the transition. Matthew has the documents. We will reconvene in 1 hour after this has been tidied." The tidying was swift. Security arrived, 2 grim men who hoisted a babbling, weeping Benjamin Carter to his feet and escorted him out. The medical team was next, loading Noah unconscious, his face pale and slack onto a stretcher. As they wheeled him out, one of his arms hung limp, his $50,000 watch catching the light. It was the last time he would ever leave that room as its king. Audrey's orders were followed to the letter. As Noah was being transported to the hospital, Matthew Finch was filing the SEC complaint. By the time Noah was being checked into a private room, the U.S. Attorney's Office was receiving a 500-page digital file. And by the time he woke up groggy and disoriented, with a splitting headache, his world had been salted. He found himself in a standard beige-walled hospital room. The psychiatric hold Audrey had ordered was in full effect justified by his violent outburst and subsequent collapse. A nurse, impassive, informed him he was a liability. I want my lawyer." He rasped, his throat dry. "Which one?" the nurse asked, not unkindly, checking his IV. "The ones from Morgan and Finch are no longer on your retainer, and the number for your personal counsel. It's been disconnected." Panic, cold and acidic, began to rise. "My phone. Get me my phone." "It was non-responsive, sir. But it won't matter. Your accounts have been frozen by federal order. You have no access to funds. Dr. Hayes is covering this hospital stay, but your insurance has been terminated pending the fraud investigation." He was broke. Not just company broke. Personally broke. The asset freeze had been total. He was in fact a charity case. He was trapped in a hospital he couldn't pay for on the orders of a wife who was methodically erasing him from existence. He tried to scream, but all that came out was a dry, pathetic croak. The news cycle was not a wave, it was an extinction-level event. The Wall Street Journal ran the official story, "Williams' Empire, a simple fraud. Wife's secret biotech firm takes over, exposes billions in debt." But the tabloids, the cable news circuits, they had the real poison. Someone Audrey's ruthlessly efficient PR team had leaked the audio. Not just the boardroom, but the gala. All across the country, people heard Noah's booming, patronizing voice. "My beautiful, empty-headed charity case," followed immediately by a cold financial analyst's voice detailing the $800 million in wire fraud. He wasn't just a criminal. He was a joke. He was a meme. He was a national cautionary tale, all before his anesthesia had worn off. His friends vanished. His clubs, the Met. The union revoked his membership before lunch, citing moral turpitude. He was a social leper. Audrey, meanwhile, was not celebrating. She was working. She didn't move into Noah's cavernous, dark office. She had it gutted. The mahogany, the wet bar, the leather-bound books he'd never read, all of it, was torn out, carted away like debris from a bomb site. She replaced it with floor-to-ceiling whiteboards, smart glass, and data ports. It ceased to be a monument to an ego. It became a laboratory. Her first act as CEO was to call an all-hands meeting in the company auditorium. The atmosphere was thick with terror. Hundreds of employees, people who had survived Noah's brutal arbitrary firings for years, now expected the final axe to fall. Audrey walked onto the stage. No podium, no notes. "Good morning," she said. The sound system carried her clear, calm voice to every corner. "My name is Dr. Audrey Hayes. For 15 years you knew me as Noah Williams' wife. That association is over. I am your new CEO." The silence was absolute. "You are here today because you are the best at what you do." She continued, her eyes scanning the crowd. "You are the most brilliant analysts, programmers, and engineers on Wall Street, and you have been forced by threat of termination to apply your genius to a lie. You were propping up a fraudulent, parasitic system. That ends now." She took a breath. William Innovations is dead. Its name, its logo, its toxic culture are being scrubbed from this building as I speak. But its talent is being repurposed. Aura Therapeutics is a company dedicated to saving lives. From this moment on, so are you. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Your work is no longer about making one man rich. It's about modeling protein structures. It's about creating logistical systems to deliver our treatments to rural hospitals. It's about analyzing genomic data to find the next target. Your work, starting today, is about purpose. She looked into the third row at a woman who was visibly trembling. Sarah Jenkins, a quantitative analyst with a PhD from MIT, whom Noah had repeatedly called school marmish and passed over for promotion in favor of sycophants like Carter. "Sarah Jenkins," Audrey said. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "You've been running the numbers for this place from the shadows for 6 years. You're the one who built the algorithm Carter took credit for. I saw your original file on the server. You're my new chief operating officer. See me after this meeting." The entire auditorium seemed to gasp with her. It wasn't just a promotion. It was a revolution. It was a statement the sycophants were out, the talent was in. Audrey wasn't a destroyer. She was a refiner. She was cleaning the house, but she was saving the foundation. The final piece of business came a week later. Audrey was in her new, bright office. It smelled of fresh paint and ozone from the servers when her assistant buzzed. "Dr. Hayes, a Mr. Connor McDermott is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's very insistent." "Send him in," Audrey said, not looking up from a complex equation she was sketching on her whiteboard. Connor, Noah's slimy friend, slithered in a massive, obsequious bouquet of orchids in his hands. "Audrey, my God, Dr. Hayes. What a phoenix act. I am just awestruck." He set the flowers on her minimalist desk. I had to come and say it. I always knew you were the smart one. That brute, he never deserved you. He was a pig. Audrey calmly put the cap on her marker and turned, leaning against the whiteboard. "He was Connor, and you were right there in the mud with him." Connor's smile faltered for a half-second. "Aha. Well, the business we're in, you know. Sometimes you have to. But I'm here about the future, my fund. Your company. We should be partners. Whatever you need. Capital. Distribution. Just say the word. Audrey looked at the orchids, then at him. She smiled a small, clinical, chilling smile. It's funny you should mention partnerships, Connor. My audit of Noah's personal accounts was exhaustive. Your name kept popping up. She tapped her tablet. The large wall monitor, which had been displaying a 3D protein model, flickered. It was now a simple ledger. This consulting fee you paid him just 2 days before he inexplicably tanked the bid on that data firm you wanted, and this friendly $5 million loan you gave him, which he then used to short a biotech stock. Your own fund was publicly praising. It looks an awful lot like collusion. Insider trading, even. Connor's tan went chalky. Now, Audrey, that's business between friends. You can't prove. I don't have to, Audrey said. But Noah is going to prison for a very, very long time. Men like him in that environment, they get desperate. They look for leverage. They look for deals. They like to talk. He's going to sing Connor. And your name is the first verse. She stood up. My legal team has already sent their findings to the U.S. attorney. They're just deciding, I'm told, whether to name you as a material witness or a co-conspirator. I'd say your partnership offer is about a week too late. She walked to her desk, picked up the entire elaborate vase of orchids, and dumped it into the wastebasket. You can leave Connor. He fled. Audrey Hayes stood at the window, not looking down at the city, as a map she owned that was Noah's fantasy. She saw it as a complex system of interconnected nodes, a problem to be solved. Her work had been interrupted by a 15-year-long domestic disturbance. Now the disturbance was over. She turned from the window, picked up her stylus, and on a clean white board began to sketch the equations for her next idea. The work was just beginning. Noah William was found guilty on 6 counts of fraud and conspiracy. He was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison, his name erased from the buildings he built. Benjamin Carter testified against him for a reduced sentence. Connor McDermott is facing his own SEC investigation. And Dr. Audrey Hayes. Her company, Aura Therapeutics, just received FDA approval for its pediatric cancer treatment, and its valuation is now one of the largest on Earth. She proved that the loudest voice in the room is almost never the most powerful. The person they dismiss, the one they mock, the simple one they shame, is often the one holding all the cards. What did you think of Audrey's long game? Was her revenge justified, or was it as cold as Noah's own ambition? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories of justice and unbelievable real-life twists, make sure to like this video. Share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to our channel for more true stories that are stranger than fiction. Click that bell so you never miss an update. Eleanor Carter never imagined her life would spiral into a whirlwind of heartbreak, betrayal, and unspeakable survival. One fateful night, cast out on the cold, unforgiving streets, she found herself giving birth in an empty alley with no help in sight. Her millionaire ex-partner, Adrian Davenport, was nowhere to be found. Yet destiny had other plans. Months later they would come face to face again, but this time under the glaring lights of a courtroom, with the relentless echo of a judge's gavel thundering in the background. Prepare for an unforgettable journey entwined with secrets, scandals, and a relentless quest for justice that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Elena Carter had grown accustomed to the noises of the city, the taxi horns, distant sirens, and the electric hum of street lamps. But on this particular night, every sound felt amplified. The cold seeped through her tattered coat, chilling her to the bone. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she clutched her swollen belly. She stumbled through the dark alley, breath coming in quick, shallow gasps, searching for any sign of help. Her mind raced with a single, frantic question. Where is Adrian? He had promised to be there for her, to protect her and their unborn child. But as her due date approached, the phone calls stopped and the texts never came. The man who once swore his undying love vanished without a trace. At first, Elena believed he was busy handling the affairs of Davenport Holdings. Adrian was, after all, the youngest heir to a formidable business empire. He spent his days attending endless meetings at the family firm's head office in Chicago's Loop, dining with politicians and rubbing shoulders at exclusive galas. She brushed aside her doubts, clinging to the idea that once his work settled, he would return to her side. But here she was alone in labor, and desperately hoping for a miracle. The contraction hit her with brutal force. Elena collapsed against a graffiti-covered wall, gritting her teeth so hard she feared they might crack. She had no phone. She had no one to call. She'd pawned her last valuable possession, her mother's locket, just to afford a few nights at a run-down motel. But now even that was gone. She looked up and down the deserted alley, praying someone might pass by. Her pleas were swallowed by the roar of an approaching train overhead. In that suffocating moment, Eleanor realized she would have to deliver her baby by herself. Panic seized her heart, but a fierce maternal instinct also flooded her veins. She forced herself to breathe, to remember the techniques she'd read about months ago. As another contraction racked her body, Eleanor screamed into the darkness. She felt the baby descending, a sensation both terrifying and miraculous. She removed her coat, spreading it on the cold, damp pavement. The city's neon glow illuminated the graffiti around her, and she felt for a fleeting second that this heart-breakingly surreal scene might be the end of her. But she pushed forward, determined to bring her child into the world, no matter the cost. A sudden wave of relief swept over Elena when she heard a faint voice from the mouth of the alley. An elderly man who introduced himself as Mr. Harold James, wearing a threadbare trench coat, had heard her cries. Under normal circumstances, he might have hurried on, fearful of city dangers, but something compelled him to step forward. Crouching beside Elena, he offered nothing more than a few words of encouragement, and trembling hands he admitted he knew next to nothing about childbirth. But in that moment, compassion was all Eleanor needed. With Harold's help, she tore open the hem of her dress to fashion makeshift swaddling cloths. Every nerve in her body felt aflame. She let out a raw, guttural scream. And then finally a new voice joined the piercing cry of her newborn daughter. Elena cradled the tiny infant against her chest, tears mingling with the sweat on her face. Harold rummaged through his pockets, eventually producing a clean handkerchief to gently wipe the baby's face. In the faint glow of a flickering streetlight, Eleanor cast at her child, a rush of love overwhelming the pain and desperation. She whispered a single name: Hope. In the days that followed, Eleanor's world was a fragile balancing act between survival and caring for her newborn. Mr. James, true to his unassuming kindness, led Elena to a makeshift shelter hidden beneath the overpass. The shelter, run by a small non-profit, offered warmth and anonymity. Two things she desperately needed. She tried to contact Adrian, but the line she had for him was constantly busy or disconnected. When she called Davenport Holdings, she was met with polite yet dismissive secretaries who claimed they had never heard of her. During those sleepless nights while cradling hope close, Eleanor wondered what she had done to deserve such abandonment. And yet she clung to a slender thread of optimism. Adrian was a man of ambition, recognized as a wunderkind in the financial world, a graduate of Harvard Business School, a subject of numerous articles in Forbes and The Guardian. He was adored by the public for his philanthropic endeavors and charm. Elena reasoned that the man she knew, gentle caring, couldn't have simply disappeared on purpose. But as she discovered an outdated newspaper article featuring Adrian at the Ritz-Carlton Gala with another woman on his arm, her doubts exploded into heartbreak. Had he truly replaced her? Or was there something deeper at play? The shelter manager, Teresa Alvarez, took pity on Elena's plight. She reached out to local charities, including one run by the city's Department of Human Services, in hopes of securing more permanent assistance for Elena and her newborn. The endless forms and administrative hoops felt like navigating a labyrinth. But Elena's determination never wavered. Between feedings, Elena poured every ounce of energy she had into finding work. Most potential employers turned her away the moment they saw her baby in tow. A sympathetic waitress position offered by a local diner was short-lived when Hope developed colic, and Elena's frequent absences to soothe her daughter resulted in abrupt termination. At night, Eleanor often found herself awake, listening to the distant hum of late-night traffic, reliving the sweet memories with Adrian. She remembered the penthouse parties at the Drake Hotel, the spontaneous weekend trips to Napa Valley, and the times he used to whisper promises of a life filled with love and security. How could that same man leave her to fend for herself in the cold streets of Chicago? Desperation fueled her. She wrote letters addressed directly to Adrian's personal penthouse, even slipping one under the doors of Davenport Holdings. Silence remained her only reply. Behind the walls of Davenport Holdings, Adrian's world was equally tumultuous, though in a very different way. After his father's sudden passing from a heart attack, Adrian found himself in the crosshairs of board members, executives, and opportunistic relatives who all questioned whether he had the mettle to steer the Davenport empire. He spent long nights buried in financial reports, ironically unaware that just a few miles away, Eleanor was fighting to keep their newborn daughter fed and warm. Whenever thoughts of Elena surfaced, her radiant smile, her unwavering belief in him, he tried to dismiss them. The memory of their argument, the hurt on her face as he walked out the door, weighed heavily on him. Yet he convinced himself he was doing the right thing by focusing on the business. Meanwhile, Adrian's best friend and personal attorney, Mark Henderson, cautioned him repeatedly. "If Eleanor is pregnant, you need to address it," Mark insisted. Ignoring the possibility could lead to legal trouble down the road. But Adrian, grappling with his own insecurities and illusions of betrayal, brushed aside his friend's concerns. With the entire Davenport board pressuring him to secure a profitable merger, Adrian allowed his personal life to remain an unresolved mystery. Winter arrived mercilessly in Chicago, the sub-zero winds cutting across Lake Michigan and leaving ice crystals in their wake. For Elena and her baby, warmth was a luxury they could seldom afford. Through the non-profit's coordination, they secured a small room in a halfway house. The cramped space, flaking walls and drafty windows were far from ideal, but Elena found a glimmer of hope in having a door to lock at night. Every morning she dressed Hope in layers of donated clothes before braving the frigid streets to search for work. She handed out resumes at fast food chains, retail stores, and even administrative offices. Most places either ignored her or expressed sympathy before showing her the door. "We'll keep your application on file," they'd say, their eyes betraying a pity she loathed. One fateful day, after trudging through a blizzard, Eleanor collapsed on the sidewalk, her body shaking from exhaustion. A passerby named Patricia Locke, an off-duty social worker, found her and immediately called an ambulance. At Mount Sinai Hospital, doctors discovered severe anemia, dehydration, and signs of malnourishment. For Elena, the hospital bed and the gentle hum of machines offered a fleeting sense of safety, even if Hope's cries in the nursery reminded her that they still had an uphill battle to fight. While Elena recovered at Mount Sinai, Patricia Locke, the caring social worker who found her, visited every day. She brought small comforts, a cozy blanket for Hope, a set of baby bottles, and offered a compassionate ear. It was Patricia who first gently suggested legal counsel. "Eleanor," Patricia said one afternoon, "you have rights, and so does your daughter. If Adrian Davenport is truly the father, you need to consider seeking child support or any financial help the law might provide." The mention of Adrian's name triggered a wave of conflicting emotions in Eleanor: anger, sorrow, and a glimmer of lingering love. She had been too proud, or perhaps too frightened, to consider legal action before. The mere idea of dragging her once-beloved partner into court felt like another betrayal of her hopes for a reconciled family. But she had to face the reality her baby needed stability, and she was running out of ways to provide it alone. By the time Elena was discharged, Patricia had connected her with a pro bono legal clinic. There, Elena was introduced to Marcia Bradshaw, a determined young attorney with kind eyes who specialized in family law. And with that single step, the trajectory of Elena's world began to shift. Marcia Bradshaw's office was modest, nestled in a worn-out building housing various non-profits. Unlike the gleaming high-rises of Davenport Holdings, the space here was cramped and the elevator often broken. But Elena immediately felt at ease. There was an air of sincerity in Marcia's posture as she gestured for Elena to sit. As Elena recounted her story, Marcia listened intently, scribbling notes on a yellow legal pad. The attorney's brow furrowed when Elena described giving birth alone in an alley, and the subsequent silence from Adrian. "If Adrian Davenport is the father," Marcia said carefully, "we can pursue a paternity test, child support, and potentially more. But you must be prepared for a fight. The Davenports are powerful, and they're not going to roll out a welcome mat." Fear and resolve wrestled within Elena. She cradled hope as the baby fussed her cries, echoing through the cramped room. Elena knew she was venturing into uncharted territory, a world of court documents and depositions, but she no longer had the luxury of choice. Leaving Marcia's office, Elena felt a rush of anxious determination. The protective walls she'd tried to build around her heartbreak were slowly giving way to a new resolve. "I will fight for my daughter's future." The day the official letter arrived at Davenport Holdings was one Adrian would never forget. The engraved envelope bore Marcia Bradshaw's name and the words "Notice of Paternity and Child Support Hearing." Adrian stared at the letter, his mind racing, heart pounding as he read through the legal jargon. He felt a maelstrom of emotions: anger at the sudden intrusion into his carefully curated life, guilt for having let things spiral so far, and a strange flicker of relief that at last the question of Elena would be addressed. He remembered how he once imagined proposing to her on a yacht in the Adriatic Sea, how he had envisioned a future of laughter and children running around an estate in Lake Forest. That dream had evaporated into thin air, replaced by board meetings and silent phone calls. Mark Henderson, Adrian's attorney and friend, read the document over his shoulder. "You need to deal with this carefully," Mark warned. "If the test proves the child is yours, you can't ignore it. Not legally, not morally." Without responding, Adrian set the letter aside, fists clenched. He felt cornered and betrayed, yet he couldn't deny an inexplicable ache in his chest. A child. His child. That realization would change everything. Elena's first court hearing was scheduled at the Cook County Circuit Court. The antique architecture of the courthouse, with its towering pillars and hushed halls, made her feel both insignificant and strangely hopeful. She clutched hope tightly, trying to focus on the rhythmic breathing of her baby, rather than the hammering of her own heart. Anxiety pinned her to her seat in the waiting area. She wasn't dressed in designer clothing or accompanied by a legal entourage. All she had was Marcia by her side. She couldn't help but recall the glittering galas she had once attended with Adrian. It seemed surreal that she was now about to face him in a courtroom. When Adrian finally arrived, Elena felt her breath hitch. He looked every bit the polished millionaire tailored suit, polished shoes, cool confidence. Yet in his eyes, she glimpsed a flicker of something that looked a lot like regret. The hearing was brief. Judge Isaac Moretti, known for his stern demeanor, listened attentively as Marcia outlined the need for an immediate paternity test. Adrian's legal team, led by a seasoned lawyer named Robert King, tried to dismiss the case as a baseless claim. But Judge Moretti ordered the test without hesitation, setting in motion the legal machinery that would forever link their fates. The paternity test results came back positive. Adrian Davenport was indeed Hope's father. The news spread through the corridors of Davenport Holdings like wildfire, fueling office gossip and shaking the family's pristine image. Adrian's stepmother, Lucinda Davenport, practically frothed at the mouth with indignation, convinced Elena was nothing more than a cunning gold digger. Behind closed doors, Adrian's board of directors were not pleased either. The timing could not have been worse. Davenport Holdings was on the cusp of closing a multi-million-dollar deal with Morgan Stanley, and shareholders feared negative press might jeopardize the negotiations. Whispers of damage control echoed in the executive suites, while social media buzzed with rumors, speculation, and paparazzi snapshots. For Elena, the test result was a bittersweet vindication. She had never doubted who Hope's father was, but seeing the official paperwork gave her a momentary surge of courage. Marcia assured her that the next steps formalizing child support, possibly negotiating custody rights, were well within her legal claims. Still, a pang of sadness clung to her. Despite her anger and hurt, a small part of her had yearned for an apology or some show of remorse from Adrian that went beyond mere legal obligation. But for now, the fight had only just begun, as the public eye turned toward the unfolding drama media outlets, scrambled for angles. The Chicago Tribune ran a headline, "Millionaire Heir, Adrian Davenport, in Paternity Scandal." Talk shows, tabloid websites, and social media hashtags proliferated. Meanwhile, Elena found herself fending off reporters who camped outside the shelter, where she sometimes volunteered, eager to snap pictures of her with Hope. Marcia advised Elena to maintain privacy and focus on the court proceedings, but the relentless intrusion weighed on her. She worried about how the press would frame her story. She was not a schemer, nor was she some naive girl chasing a wealthy man's fortune. She was simply a mother, fighting for her child's rightful support. Adrian, on the other hand, had spun into a crisis management frenzy. Robert King arranged a discreet meeting with Marcia to gauge the possibility of settling out of court. They proposed a lump sum of money in exchange for full custody, hoping to shield the Davenport name from ongoing scandal. Eleanor was appalled by the suggestion that she might sell her child to a father who had been absent throughout her pregnancy and her daughter's early months. For Elena, the lines were clear. She wanted Adrian to be involved in Hope's life, but not at the cost of being pushed aside like an inconvenience. A crucial turning point arrived when Marcia scheduled a mediation session. The goal was to see if a compromise could be reached without dragging the matter through a drawn-out trial. The sterile conference room in the courthouse felt suffocating, its white walls echoing even the slightest shuffle of papers. Eleanor sat on one side with Marcia. Adrian, flanked by Robert King, occupied the other. The mediator, a soft-spoken woman named Linda Moore, explained the process. "We're here to see if there's a middle ground," she said, her gentle tone attempting to melt the icy tension. Elena expected Adrian to open with a tirade or an accusation. Instead, he surprised her. I never meant for it to get to this," he began haltingly. I thought you'd moved on. I didn't know you were homeless or struggling. If I had known, He trailed off, his eyes flickering with guilt. For a second, Eleanor felt her heart soften. She recalled the tenderness he once showed her, the man who never hesitated to hold her hand in public, who spoke of building a family someday. But then she remembered the labor pains, the cold alley, and the desperate nights. That memory hardened her resolve. A real apology wasn't enough. She needed a sincere commitment to her and Hope's well-being. The mediation session ended without a resolution. Adrian insisted he wanted to be part of Hope's life, but Robert King recommended that Elena relinquish physical custody in exchange for generous financial compensation. Elena stood firm, refusing to let Adrian come and go at will, without shouldering true parental responsibility. Outside the courthouse, media photographers snapped pictures capturing the tension etched on Elena's face and the discomfort in Adrian's posture. Headlines spun wildly: heirs, love child, sparks. Heated custody battle. Mother of Davenport. Baby rejects lavish settlement. Elena returned to her cramped room that night, emotionally drained. Though she believed she was making the right choices for Hope, fear gnawed at her. She worried about the financial might of the Davenport family, their ability to drag her through an endless legal process. Would she be forced into a settlement just to keep her daughter secure? After putting Hope to sleep, Elena found a quiet moment to look through old photographs. She remembered happier days, times when Adrian would spin her around the living room while jazz music played in the background. Those memories felt like a lifetime ago. Resolute and exhausted, she reminded herself of the life she wanted to build for her daughter, a life free from fear and uncertainty. Tensions soared as the custody hearing approached. Judge Moretti had ordered a child services evaluation to assess both parents' living conditions and emotional capacity to care for Hope. A social worker named Clara Nolan visited Elena's humble accommodations, noting the cleanliness and the bond between mother and child, despite the limited resources. A week later, Clara arrived at Adrian's penthouse, located in a prestigious building overlooking Lake Michigan. The interior was immaculate, polished marble floors, high ceilings, and unobstructed view of the city skyline. But as Clara carefully asked Adrian questions about his role as a father, his responses seemed practiced as if guided by legal coaching. Behind the scenes, Adrian struggled. On one hand, he genuinely wanted to connect with the daughter he'd only just discovered. On the other, he felt immense pressure from his family and corporate obligations. There were times he'd slip away to his private office, gazing at the paternity test results, and wondering what kind of father he could be if he barely knew how to slow down. When Clara concluded her visits, she prepared a thorough report for the court, one that would weigh heavily in determining custody arrangements. Both Elena and Adrian braced themselves, not knowing which way the scales of justice would tip. The morning of the custody hearing dawned grey and chilly, reflecting the mood that enveloped the courthouse. Journalists lined the entrance cameras, flashing with relentless curiosity. Elena felt faint, her stomach churning from a mix of nerves and residual hunger. She'd skipped breakfast, having lost her appetite. In the courtroom, Judge Moretti wasted no time. Clara Nolan's report highlighted that while Adrian could offer financial stability and a luxurious environment, he had yet to demonstrate any hands-on parenting skills. Elena, on the other hand, had been the sole caregiver, albeit in impoverished circumstances, showing unwavering devotion to the child's welfare. Marcia argued passionately that Hope deserved not just money, but emotional security. She insisted that uprooting the infant from her mother's care would be traumatic. Robert King countered, emphasizing Adrian's resources and willingness to employ the best nannies, tutors, and medical specialists. He framed it as an opportunity for Hope to flourish in ways that Elena could never provide. Judge Moretti listened carefully, his face unreadable. After hours of testimony and legal arguments, he announced that he would take the matter under advisement. The final decision would be pronounced in a week's time. Eleanor exited the courtroom with her heart pounding, wondering if she would lose the only family she had left. As the days ticked by, Elena found herself swinging between fragile hope and crushing dread. The media coverage intensified, and she even discovered online forums where people debated her life like a soap opera, some branding her a gold digger, others calling Adrian a deadbeat father. Adrian retreated into isolation. He cancelled public appearances, delegated board responsibilities, and spent long hours alone in his penthouse. Each evening, he replayed memories of Elena in his mind, the warmth of her laughter, the strength she possessed even in adversity. Guilt coiled within him, especially when he thought about how he'd cut her off without an explanation. One evening, rummaging through old photo albums, Adrian stumbled upon a note Eleanor had once slipped into his briefcase, a small letter filled with her dreams for their future. Her handwriting read, "I believe in you. I believe in us." Adrian felt tears sting his eyes. He realized, perhaps too late, that his misguided attempts to shield his inheritance and reputation had cost him the one person who believed in his better self. With renewed determination, Adrian picked up the phone and dialed Mark Henderson's number. "I want to make this right," he said quietly, feeling the weight of each syllable. "Tell me how." The next day, Marcia's phone rang. On the line was Mark Henderson proposing a private meeting between Adrian and Eleanor without the glare of the media or the influence of attorneys. Marcia hesitated, but eventually agreed, sensing that dialogue might bridge the chasm between them. Elena was skeptical. She didn't want another meeting where Adrian's lawyer waved large checks in her face. But Marcia convinced her that maybe, just maybe, Adrian had finally seen the light. So on a chilly Friday evening, under the discreet arrangement of Mark and Marcia, Eleanor took a taxi to a small cafe in an unassuming part of town. Adrian was already waiting, hunched over a table with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He stood up the moment Elena entered, his eyes immediately darting to the infant carrier in her arms. Hope was asleep, her tiny nose peeking out from beneath a knitted pink hat. For a tense moment, neither spoke. Then in a hushed tone, Adrian broke the silence. "She's beautiful." He hesitantly reached out, brushing a gentle fingertip across Hope's tiny hand. Elena's heart constricted. In that moment, she saw not the millionaire heir, but a father astonished by his child. They sat down, words tumbling out hesitantly at first, but soon flowing. Apologies, regrets, confessions of fear and pride. Outside the wind howled, but inside that modest cafe, a fragile truce began to form. Elena left the cafe feeling as if she had just stepped off a roller coaster. She and Adrian had talked for hours about the lost months, her homelessness, the labor in an alley, his blind ambition, and the manipulative counsel of those around him. Despite her lingering anger, she couldn't deny that Adrian seemed genuine in his remorse, his eyes brimming with emotion whenever Hope made a tiny cooing sound. Though no concrete agreement was forged, they had taken a step closer to understanding. Adrian promised Elena that he would no longer hide behind the corporate fortress. If the court granted joint custody, he vowed to be a present father to ensure that Hope knew he loved her. That night, Elena returned to the shelter with Hope asleep in her arms. She felt conflicted. Her brain still cautioned her not to let her guard down, reminding her of the heartbreak she'd endured. Yet her heart yearned to believe that Adrian could be the partner and father he once promised to be. A new thought nestled into her mind. Perhaps the best scenario for Hope would be a cooperative relationship. But cooperation required trust, and trust was something they'd both shattered. For now, all she could do was wait for the court's ruling and see if Adrian's actions matched his words. On the day of the final custody decision, the tension within the courtroom was palpable. Lawyers stood at their respective tables, thick files and documents stacked high. Photographers waited outside, hungry for a shot that could capture victory or defeat. Judge Moretti took his seat, scanning the room before beginning. In the matter of Davenport versus Carter, regarding custody of the minor. Hope Carter, I have reviewed the Child Services report, listened to both parties and considered the best interest of the child. His voice resonated with authority. Elena clenched her hands tightly. Marcia placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Adrian sat across from them, posture rigid. The judge explained that Hope deserved the love and care of both parents, provided each demonstrated fitness and genuine commitment. To that end, Judge Moretti continued, I am granting joint legal custody to both parties. Physical custody will remain primarily with Ms. Carter, given her demonstrated role as the primary caregiver. Mr. Davenport is granted visitation rights with a review scheduled in 6 months to determine if expanded custody is appropriate. Eleanor felt a surge of relief wash over her, tears pooling in her eyes. Adrian exhaled sharply, a complex mix of relief and resolve settling over him. The gavel's echo signaled a new chapter in their unfolding saga. In the days that followed the court's decision, Adrian took immediate steps to prove his commitment. He arranged for a modest but comfortable apartment for Eleanor and Hope, covering the lease so they no longer had to rely on the cramped quarters of the shelter. Initially, Elena resisted. She worried that accepting Adrian's help would become a new chain binding her to his will. But Marcia gently counseled that stable housing was essential for Hope's well-being, and Elena begrudgingly accepted. Still, she set boundaries. She refused to accept a personal driver or a credit card. I want to stand on my own feet, she insisted. Adrian respected that choice, albeit with lingering concern. For Adrian, transitioning into fatherhood was humbling and at times awkward. He'd show up on weekends with groceries, baby toys, and books he was reading on how to care for infants. He took to heart every detail Elena offered, how to hold Hope correctly, how to burp her, how to recognize her different cries. Bit by bit, he caught glimpses of the daily struggles Elena endured, the midnight feedings, the diapers, the constant worry over money. With each late-night bottle he prepared, and each lullaby he learned, Adrian felt a foreign yet comforting sense of purpose awakening in him. As Hope reached 6 months old, her giggles and coos transformed the once quiet apartment into a place of joy and promise. Elena found part-time work at a local community center, helping to organize charity drives for families in need, a role that resonated deeply with her recent experiences. With Adrian's financial support for childcare, she could finally balance work and motherhood. Their co-parenting arrangement wasn't without its challenges. Adrian's demanding schedule sometimes caused him to miss scheduled visits, igniting Elena's frustration. In turn, Elena's pride often made it difficult to accept gifts or assistance beyond the bare minimum. They argued, occasionally, old wounds and mistrust surfacing at the worst moments. Yet amid the strain, a growing sense of mutual respect emerged. Adrian discovered that being a father wasn't just about providing resources. It was about being present, listening to the stories of Hope's milestones, her first attempt at crawling her discovery of how to clap her hands with delight. Elena learned that she could lean on someone else without forfeiting her independence or identity. Slowly but steadily, they formed a tentative partnership focused on Hope's happiness, and in fleeting moments they caught themselves smiling at each other, recalling a lost tenderness that once bound them together. Just when things seemed to be reaching a fragile equilibrium, fate threw another curveball. A letter arrived from the Davenport family's legal team, informing Adrian that his extended family intended to challenge his ability to lead Davenport Holdings. Rumors of scandal and poor judgment swirled among board members. The story of Adrian's love child had dampened investor confidence, and certain factions within the company wanted him removed as CEO before the upcoming annual shareholder meeting. Adrian felt torn. The pressure from the board forced him into endless strategy sessions, leaving him little time for his newly formed paternal duties. Stress and sleepless nights once again plagued him. Only this time, the thought of losing his daughter's blossoming trust felt more terrifying than losing the company. Elena noticed Adrian's sudden absences, the unread texts, the last-minute cancellations. Old anxieties gnawed at her. Was he pulling away again when life became too complicated? But one night, Adrian showed up at the apartment unannounced, eyes dark with exhaustion. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "they're trying to oust me from the company. If I lose my position, I lose my standing, and with that I might lose credibility in court if custody is revisited." In that moment, Eleanor saw past his polished exterior to the vulnerable man she once loved. She felt a rush of sympathy, remembering her own struggles for survival. They were both fighting battles, each in a different arena, but connected by the same driving force, Hope's future. Determined not to let external forces tear them apart, Adrian and Elena found themselves working together in an unexpected way. While Adrian battled board politics, Elena, in her own quiet manner, stepped forward to defend him publicly. She gave a small interview to a local reporter, someone she trusted from her volunteer work, clarifying that Adrian was not the villain that tabloids painted him to be. "I won't deny our history is complicated," Elena said, cradling Hope on her lap during the interview. "But Adrian Davenport has been stepping up as a father. He's learning, he's trying, and that means more to me than his net worth ever could." The interview went viral, eliciting mixed reactions. Some cynics claimed Elena had been bought off, while others admired her honesty. Yet the simple act of standing up for Adrian resonated with key investors who saw a different side of him. A man willing to own his mistakes and grow from them. As the annual shareholder meeting approached, the tension mounted. Adrian prepared presentations, gathered supportive statements, and readied a contingency plan if all else failed. At the same time, Elena braced herself for the possibility that the stability they'd just begun to enjoy might come crashing down should Adrian lose control of Davenport Holdings. The day of the shareholder meeting arrived with all the drama of a high-stakes showdown. The boardroom at Davenport Holdings was buzzing with tension. Rows of leather chairs faced a large screen, displaying financial graphs and corporate forecasts. Major investors from across the globe dialed in via video conference. Adrian presented his case, a transparent look at Davenport Holdings' performance under his leadership growth metrics and future plans. His voice was calm but firm, addressing controversies head-on. He even touched upon the paternity case, emphasizing that while the media had sensationalized his personal life, it had not impacted the company's profitability or strategic vision. Then, one by one, board members asked questions, some supportive, others accusatory. Lucinda Davenport. His stepmother led the charge to remove him, claiming he lacked the moral fiber to represent the company. Adrian countered calmly, reminding everyone that personal matters should not outweigh professional competence. In a surprising twist, Mark Henderson, Adrian's personal attorney, stood to share statements from philanthropic organizations praising Adrian's renewed commitment to social causes, some of which Elena had encouraged him to support. Slowly, the atmosphere shifted. By the time the final vote was taken, it was announced that Adrian would retain his position as CEO, winning by a narrow margin. Relief washed over him, but as he walked out of the boardroom, he knew this was only one victory in a much larger battle for redemption. That evening, Adrian arrived at Elena's apartment with a bouquet of lilies, her favorite flower. While the gesture was simple, it was the first time in months he'd shown up for a reason other than fatherly duties or crisis management. Elena welcomed him inside, noticing the weariness etched on his face. They sat in the small living room, the sound of Hope's lullaby machine humming softly from the bedroom. Adrian recounted the day's events, the tension, the accusations, the final vote. Elena listened, relieved that he'd managed to hold on to his leadership role. In the quiet that followed, she found herself reminiscing aloud about their early days, the time they tried tandem skydiving in Nevada, the quiet mornings, sipping coffee on his penthouse balcony, how he would whisper jokes just to make her laugh. Adrian smiled sadly, acknowledging how far they had strayed from those moments. A flicker of vulnerability passed between them. For Elena, it was both comforting and unsettling. She realized they were no longer the starry-eyed couple they once were. Too many harsh realities had tested their bond. Yet in that fleeting moment, the possibility of forging a new relationship built on honesty and shared responsibility didn't seem so impossible. Over the following weeks, Adrian gradually transitioned into a more present, engaged father. No longer buried beneath the avalanche of corporate obligations, he restructured his schedule, hiring trusted deputies to manage the day-to-day operations of Davenport Holdings. That decision gave him something money couldn't buy: time. And he poured that time into being with Hope. He arrived early on weekends, often surprising Elena with breakfast in hand, usually slightly cold, but the thought warmed her. Together they experienced milestones that most parents took for granted. Adrian was there when Hope giggled uncontrollably at her first bubble bath, and when she tried to crawl only to topple face first onto a plush rug. He laughed, cheered, and even cried when Hope uttered her first word. Mama Eleanor teased him for pouting, but secretly she was touched by how deeply he cared. The community center where Elena worked was preparing for its biggest event, yet a charity gala supporting homeless mothers and children. It was a cause deeply personal to her, and she'd spent months helping to organize every detail. Nervously, she handed Adrian an invitation one evening. "You don't have to come," she said quickly. "It's small, Nothing like the Davenport Foundation galas you're used to. Adrian studied the invitation. Elena, if this matters to you, it matters to me. He insisted on donating, but she was firm. Do it anonymously. I don't want anyone to think I'm parading you around for donations. He smiled. Then I'll show up and clap the loudest when you take the mic. At the gala, Elena wore a simple yet elegant navy blue dress borrowed from the center's donation wardrobe. She moved gracefully between guests, sharing her story without embellishing the tragedy or martyring herself. Sometimes life breaks you open so that light can get in. She told one donor eyes, briefly glancing toward Hope, sleeping in her stroller nearby. Adrian, standing at the edge of the crowd, watched her in awe. The woman he once saw only through the lens of romance had transformed into something even more formidable. An advocate, a leader, a survivor. After her speech, which ended with a standing ovation, Eleanor found Adrian waiting for her in the hallway, holding 2 cups of punch and looking slightly overwhelmed. You were incredible, he said. Honestly, I've never been prouder. Elena looked at him, unsure how to respond. So much had passed between them. Betrayal, distance, hardship. But in that moment, she saw none of it. She saw a man slowly shedding his armor, trying to rebuild what he had once destroyed. Later that night after the event, as they sat on Elena's couch, while Hope slept soundly in her crib, they spoke of dreams not just for their daughter, but for themselves. Not the extravagant kind from their past, but quiet, meaningful ones, starting a literacy program at the center, traveling someday with Hope, maybe even writing a children's book together. Though the future remained uncertain, the bond between them deepened, forged not through romance but resilience. And from that place, something new began to bloom. One crisp autumn afternoon, golden leaves spiraled down from the trees as Adrian took Elena and Hope on a quiet outing to the Chicago Botanic Garden. The air carried the faint scent of pine and earth, and laughter floated on the breeze from nearby families enjoying the rare sunny day. Hope, now full of energy and curiosity, sat in her stroller wide-eyed at every fluttering leaf and blooming petal, pointing and babbling in delight. Adrian pushed the stroller gently while Elena walked beside him. Their steps unhurried for the first time in a long while. The sunlight glinted through the trees, casting shifting patterns on the path. It felt almost surreal after all the months of legal battles, sleepless nights and heartbreak, to be here in a moment so peaceful and undisturbed. They paused near a small pond where ducks drifted lazily across the surface. Adrian reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a few breadcrumbs he'd brought along. Let's give her her first duck-feeding memory, he said, smiling as he handed a few crumbs to Elena and crouched beside Hope. The little girl squealed with glee as Adrian helped her toss them into the water. When they found a shaded bench beneath a tall oak tree, Elena sat down and leaned back, watching as Adrian continued to entertain Hope with silly faces and animated animal sounds. The bond between them had grown stronger, unmistakably genuine. Elena couldn't deny how far Adrian had come, not just in court appearances or financial responsibility, but in the daily unglamorous moments of fatherhood. Adrian eventually joined her on the bench, sitting close, but careful not to presume too much. There was a long silence before he spoke. I've been thinking, he said, eyes fixed on Hope, playing with a leaf in her tiny hands. About everything. How far we've come, and how far I still need to go. Elena turned her head toward him, listening intently. I know I can't rewrite the past, he continued, but I want to build something better for her, for us, I'm not talking about a perfect family wrapped in a bow. I know we're not there. But maybe we could try again. Not just as co-parents, but as something more. Elena felt her breath catch slightly. She looked down at their intertwined hands, remembering every low point, the alley, the courtroom, the nights when she doubted she could survive. And yet here he was, not the arrogant millionaire she had once feared, but a man learning to love with humility and care. "I don't have an answer right now," she said softly, brushing a wind-blown curl from her face. "But I'm willing to keep walking forward with you. One step at a time." Adrian nodded slowly, clearly moved. That's all I could hope for. As the sun dipped lower and the shadows lengthened, the three of them sat in quiet harmony, watching the ducks glide across the pond. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was real. It was healing, and it was theirs. 3 months later, the sharp bite of winter had returned, but Elena Carter no longer feared the cold. She stood inside a modest but warm townhouse nestled on a quiet street in Evanston, a far cry from the shelter beds and crumbling walls of her past. The house was part of a new chapter she and Adrian had begun, one rooted not in old promises, but in careful progress. They had agreed to co-parent under one roof, not as lovers, but as partners in raising their daughter. Separate bedrooms, separate routines, but shared goals and growing respect. Hope toddled across the hardwood floor in mismatched socks, giggling as she clutched her favorite stuffed bear. Adrian sat cross-legged nearby, trying to baby-proof the bookshelf with instructions that might as well have been written in Greek. "These screws are evil," he muttered, prompting a laugh from Elena as she walked in with 2 mugs of tea. They still clashed now and then over money, over chores, over what constituted a suitable bedtime snack. But unlike before, they had learned how to listen. Arguments no longer escalated into cold silences. Instead, they ended with open conversations and quiet apologies. It was messy, imperfect, and very human. Their evenings had taken on a quiet rhythm. After Hope's bath, they'd gather in the small living room, with warm blankets and board books. Adrian had developed a flair for dramatic bedtime readings, complete with voices and sound effects that left Hope squealing with joy, and Elena smiling in spite of herself. When Hope was finally tucked into bed, the adults often lingered, sometimes talking, sometimes simply enjoying the silence that comes after a day well lived. One night, as snow flurries drifted past the window, Elena turned to Adrian and shared a new idea she'd been working on, expanding the community center's outreach to include legal aid and early childhood support. Adrian, genuinely impressed, offered to connect her with some of his philanthropic contacts, not as a favor, but as a collaborator. "You're building something powerful, Elena," he said. "It deserves the spotlight." "And you," she asked, "what are you building now?" He hesitated. "I think I'm learning how to build a life, not just a legacy. Something real. Something that doesn't disappear when the cameras turn off." They exchanged a long glance full of unspoken understanding. There was no rush to define what they were neither fully reconciled nor completely apart. What mattered was the space they'd created, one of safety, of effort, of love, expressed in small daily acts. Elena often thought back to that night in the alley, shivering, terrified, alone. It had marked the beginning of the hardest chapter in her life, but it had also led her here, to warmth, to healing, to possibility. As Hope stirred softly in her crib, her tiny breaths echoing through the baby monitor, Elena whispered into the quiet, "We're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long while, she truly believed it. Their journey had been anything but easy, from betrayal to legal showdowns, from lonely nights on city streets to the glaring lights of a courtroom. Yet somewhere along the way, Eleanor Carter and Adrian Davenport found a fragile strength they never knew they possessed. Through bitter truths and hard-fought compromises, they discovered that genuine love goes beyond a lavish bank account or an ironclad legal contract. It's built on presence, understanding, and an unwavering commitment to giving Hope the life she deserves. As their story continues to unfold, one truth remains clear. No matter how rocky the path, redemption and new beginnings are always possible with courage and determination. If you found inspiration or solace in this tale of resilience and the power of a parent's love, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more stories that touch the heart and awaken hope. Thank you for watching.